Runnin' Rebel Nation, how's it going? This is the Rebellion Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Staker. This is the 50th episode of the Rebellion Podcast, number 50. In honor of it being the 50th episode, I decided to do something a little different, and I am starting the Player Spotlight series, so I'm introducing this to the world, okay? This is where I pick a former UNLV basketball player, and I talk about their whole career, what they did before and after UNLV, and basically just to remember them, okay? First and foremost, before I get started with the first player ever on the Rebellion Podcast Player Spotlight series, I just wanted to say thank you to all the listeners. The Rebellion Podcast has now reached over, 9 countries now, and then 500 plus cities. People have listened to the Rebellion Podcast, so I am honored by that, and I want to appreciate all the support. Okay, today's episode of the Player Spotlight series, Remembering Marcus Banks. Marcus Banks, one of my favorite players ever to wear a scarlet and gray uniform. One of my favorite athletes ever. Okay, so I chose him to be the first player that I ever talk about in my Spotlight series. Frankly, because there's a lot to talk about with him. There's a lot of memories. There's a lot of interesting things that happened in his career that I'm going to touch on. And so I'm going to go over all that today. So first of all, to start off talking about Mr. Marcus Banks, I wanted to talk about how he was one of the most talented players in UNLV basketball history. Now, if you don't know the difference between talent and how good of a basketball player you are, they're different, okay? They're related, but they're not the same thing. A lot of people don't know this, and I have to explain it to people. Talent is basically all of your physical tools and attributes and all the little things that you can do that help you be better at this game of basketball. How much talent you have determine what your overall potential is as a basketball player, okay? So sometimes you see guys who reach their full potential and they're a really good basketball player, and they're a little bit better than another player who has not even come close to reaching their full potential, all right? That player who hasn't reached their full potential is more talented than the other player who has, okay? Hopefully that's making a little bit of sense. So you're super athletic, you have long arms, you're gifted in various areas. That is talent, okay? And how high of a ceiling you have is how high you are in the talent level realm, okay? So that was Marcus Banks. Marcus Banks was easily one of the top 5 most talented players in UNLV basketball history, okay? When you talk about just sheer talent. I think you could even make an argument that he's top 2 or 3. I mean, he's really that good. Just an electrifying player. We're talking about explosive athlete. Like defensive players, I mean, he was a nightmare for them. Because not only did he have such a quick first step and can just blow by you, he was strong. Okay, he wasn't little. When you watch his NBA games and he looks little out there compared to all those giants, but I mean, make no mistake, he was muscular and he was strong and he knew how to use it, right? So when you combine that with his blazing speed, it just made him just a nightmare to match up with, especially in college, okay? So Marcus Banks was a truly remarkable talent, one of the most exciting and electrifying players that we have ever had the pleasure of watching as UNLV fans. Now, if you are under the age of 30, I'm sure you don't remember watching him, or if you just became a UNLV fan like in the last 10 to 15 years, you probably don't have much knowledge of him. But I could say just from sheer entertainment perspective, like just how much fun you have watching a player, he's at the very, very top. Like he's at the very, very top of the list, along with, Larry Johnson was obviously very fun to watch, Stacey Ogman, Anthony Bennett. Regardless of what your opinions were on Anthony Bennett, he was fun to watch, okay? So Marcus is in that category of guys that were you just got so entertained watching them, right? Okay, so let's go ahead and get going on basically anything and everything about Marcus Banks. So first, I want to talk about the first time I ever saw Marcus Banks. How old was I? Middle school, I believe, 6th or 7th grade. And my dad told me the Rebels got this new player from junior college who's from Vegas, and he's one of the best junior college players in the country. So it was a massive pickup for the Rebels. I was like, all right, cool. Vegas guy, a big-time recruit. I'm excited. If I'm not mistaken, I think he was like the number one JUCO player in the country. Like landing him was a big deal. If he wasn't number one, he was, in that top tier of JUCO talent. So he was a big pickup for this program. And so I remember I went to the UNLV basketball first look. Now, the first look is something that they pretty much have done every single year since I've been a fan, where you come get a first look at the team. So usually those things ended up being kind of boring because they don't, as a basketball fan or just a basketball nerd in general, you want to watch real practice. You want to watch scrimmaging, but they end up just doing dumb stuff like dunk contests, which I guess dunk contests are fun if you have a bunch of high flyers, but most of the years we didn't. So they do dunk contests, but then they do all these cheerleading things and dancing things, and they have to introduce the girls team, and you don't get to watch much of what you really want to see. All that being said, I remember seeing Marcus for the first time in warm-ups, and I knew right away which one was Marcus Banks. Okay, because remember, I didn't know what he looked like at this point. I just knew he was a guard and he was a big-time talent. And I just remember watching this guy in warm-ups who just looked superior to everyone, even though it was only warm-ups. Like, just how comfortable he was handling the ball. Like, you could see how skilled he was just from doing basic, layup lines, right? And then how he would just so casually just throw the ball in the rim like one of those no rim touching dunks, he would just throw it in there like effortlessly with his head was near the rim. And I'm like, okay, that's got to be Banks, that guy right there. And I remember him warming up alongside Demetrius Hunter. They were like standing side by side, and they were both so similar in the sense of like just being explosive athletes. They were both muscular, but Demetrius Hunter was a little bit bigger. I think he was like an inch or two taller. Maybe had like 10 to 15 pounds more muscle, but they both looked like NBA players, to be honest. So that was my first time, ever seeing Marcus Banks. And then, of course, he put on a show at that first look, and it was clear we had a star player on our team. You think about, like, if we would have got Marcus Banks today, he would have, like, left after his junior year. He would have had his good junior year, and then Kentucky or Kansas would have come along and offered him $1 million, and we would not have had Marcus Banks as a senior, because that's the new college basketball, unfortunately. So let's talk about my favorite Marcus Banks memories, and then I'll kind of get into his whole career. So the first one was he completely went off in the Vegas Summer League. I don't remember what year it was. I want to say it was after his first year at Phoenix, because he was definitely an NBA veteran at this point, but he scored 42 points, and I was sitting courtside that game. So I watched him up close and personal, just completely do whatever he wanted out there. I mean, he just looked so confident, and he looked like a star. And it was exciting to see, because at this point, I was still holding on to hope that Marcus Banks was going to blow up and be like an all-star, NBA basketball player. And to watch him put on that performance, which I believe that at the time, that was the record for most points in a summer league game. If it wasn't the record, it tied the record. But yeah, it was an electrifying performance from him, and I'll never forget that. My other favorite Marcus Banks memory, let me try to think real quick. So I actually played basketball with Marcus's younger brother, Langston. I played basketball with him in 8th grade and all the way through high school. And so, yeah, I've actually known Marcus's younger brother for like 25 years or something like that. Anyways, so his younger brother Langston and I played on the same, it was NJB All-Stars, right? So it was just like a little rec league, and then the best players made the All-Star team, and I was on that team with Marcus's younger brother, and we went and played in a tournament in California, and Marcus Banks actually went to some of our games, which I was starstruck at the time because this was after his senior year where he was going into the NBA. So, I mean, he was a big time like celebrity to me. And so seeing him at all of our games and he talked to our team, that was cool. And then I remember his younger brother telling us that while he was in California, he played at an AND1 event. And if you don't remember, AND1 basketball was absolutely massive back then. I mean, we're talking, these guys were A-list celebrities in the basketball world. These guys were so famous and popular that they were as famous as the most famous NBA players. Okay, there's documentaries talking about how big time they were. Anyways, so there used to be a lot of like debate on could the AND1 guys play in the NBA. And I think people that truly know basketball were like, no, they have no chance. I mean, there's a couple of them, like Rafer Alston was a longtime NBA player. He was an AND1 guy, but he's the exception, right? The majority of those guys couldn't sniff the NBA. Anyways, I remember Langston telling us that Marcus played in an AND1 game or tournament or whatever it was, going against all those guys, and completely ate them alive. Like, he just absolutely destroyed them. And it was fun to hear that, right? Because those guys were so big time that knowing that, Marcus just went to work on them. And it was just cool. It was a good memory that always stuck with me. I have so many other Marcus Banks memories, but just for the sake of time, I'm going to just keep it at that. Okay, let's talk about pre-college. So Marcus went to Cimarron Memorial High School, which was like pretty much down the street from where I grew up. So I'm obviously very familiar with Cimarron. I'm a Centennial High School grad, and Cimarron, we were like big rivals with Cimarron back then, especially for basketball and football, big rivals. So yeah, Marcus went to Cimarron Memorial. I can't remember what year he graduated. I want to say he's like, it might have been like 2000-ish. I don't know. But yeah, he went to Cimarron, and something really interesting about Marcus Banks that I learned, and I always wondered, like, how is he this good at basketball, but wasn't like a big time recruit out of high school? I mean, I don't understand it. How did he not have all these big offers, and how did he not have all these stars next to his name in the recruiting profiles? And I don't get how he could be this good, but the only options he had was to go to like a junior college in Utah. And that's because he never really played organized basketball until his senior year of high school. That blew my mind. I had no idea. So the reason for that was, it wasn't like he was one of those guys that can't come over from Africa and they're soccer players and they get introduced to basketball. That obviously wasn't the case with Marcus. For him, it was like he always played basketball, but he just struggled with his grades. He was never eligible. Or he just never took school serious enough to realize like how important organized basketball was to reach his full potential, right? So I remember him saying the reason he struggled in school and why he was always ineligible was because his parents were working such crazy hours. And he did grow up in a 2-parent household. His parents, been together 40 plus years, which is really awesome. I love to hear that. But he said they both worked crazy hours. So he'd be home alone. And I know if I was home alone and my parents weren't making me do schoolwork, I would not have done school. So I can say that with all honesty. But he said a lot of times he had to try and teach himself stuff because they were always gone working to try and put food on the table and all that. So it wasn't until, and this was an actual Marcus Banks quote, he said, "What saved my life was my will to win in summer school." And so what he did was he ended up going to summer school. I believe it was before his senior year of high school. And at that point, his GPA was really low. It was like 1.7 or 1.9, something like that. And he took all these classes in the summer and aced them because he started taking it really seriously. He aced these classes. It got his GPA up. And now he was eligible to play basketball finally. And then had an awesome season at Cimarron. And that's what led him to going to Dixie State College. Okay. And so, I mean, it makes sense now why he didn't have a bunch of big time schools offering him scholarships when his first year of truly organized basketball was his senior year. So he has some catching up to do, right? But obviously an elite athlete. He was also a football player, if I'm not mistaken. And then, okay, so then he goes to Dixie State College, which is now Utah Tech. Okay, and let's Let's read a little bit about his career there. Okay, so Marcus Banks, who was inducted in the Utah Tech Hall of Fame in 2011, it was at the time it was a junior college called Dixie College. Okay, now it is a Division I university. Okay, so it's a big difference, right? So Marcus Banks was a 2001 graduate of Dixie College. In his sophomore season, he led the basketball team to 36-2. Wow, that is impressive. And finished third in junior college national tournament. He was the player of the year in Region 18 and was first team all NJCAA All-American selection. So NJCAA, which is National Junior College Athletic Association, that was actually the level I played at as well. So Marcus and my careers were basically identical is what I'm trying to say. So he won the Bud Obie Award, which is given to the best player under 6'1" in the junior college ranks. He led the team in scoring and was second in rebounding and averaged 17 points, 5.5 rebounds, and 4 assists per game. Okay, so that led to him getting a plethora of Division I offers, and then he ended up going to his hometown university, UNLV, Runnin' Rebels, which at this time, I mean, this was in 2001-ish, right? So in 2001, this was only 10 years prior to UNLV winning their national championship. So UNLV was still a big name at this time. Okay, it wasn't like now where we've had so many years of being irrelevant that people don't even realize that we were once a powerhouse program. So at the time, UNLV was still a big name. So I think that probably played a role in him going to UNLV. And so, okay, so he goes to UNLV. You know, I talked about my first time seeing him play. He was incredible at UNLV. A very, very good player. There was 2 star players. We had Marcus Banks and Dalron Johnson. So they were both the same year. Marcus was a junior coming from junior college, and then Dalron Johnson was a junior who I believe had been at UNLV since his freshman year. Now that year, Dalron was like Batman and Marcus Banks was like Robin because Dalron had better numbers and Dalron was the more experienced player as far as playing D1 and all that goes. But then it was pretty obvious who the more talented player was of the two. So Marcus worked his butt off in the offseason and then ended up becoming Batman his senior year. And it wasn't close. Marcus was not only UNLV's best player, but he was the best player in the Mountain West Conference, and it wasn't close. Okay, so let's look at Marcus's stats while he was at UNLV. Okay, that's per 40 minutes. Okay, so in 2001, 2002, his first year at UNLV, he averaged 15.8 points, 2.2 steals, 3.0 assists. Okay, and then that was 32.5 minutes per game. His senior year, 36.1 minutes per game, which is incredible. That is very, very high. Usually star players are in that 32 to 34 minute per game range. So Marcus was playing almost the entire game. He averaged 20.3 points, 2.8 steals, 5.5 assists, which, if I'm not mistaken, he led the conference in steals, assists, and points. And he was the defensive player of the year back-to-back years. Both his junior year and senior year, he was the Mountain West Conference Mountain West Conference Defensive Player of the Year. Okay, so very, very impressive career for Marcus when he was at UNLV. He unfortunately never got to play in the NCAA tournament, even though he should have. He really, really should have. Were we a better coached team, he definitely would have gone to the NCAA tournament because UNLV got hot at the end of the season and they kicked the crap out of their opponents in the first and second round of the Mountain West tournament. And then they played Colorado State in the championship game where they were heavy favorites, not only because of a substantial talent advantage, but they're playing in the Thomas and Mack in front of 13,000, loud Rebel fans. UNLV would actually go on to lose that game to Colorado State. And I was so depressed, so shocked, and just sad because that was supposed to be a for sure thing. Like, the Rebels are going to the NCAA tournament. Marcus Banks is going to be on, a massive stage. who knows what seed we would have got. And I'm sure we probably would have lost that first game, but you never know. Marcus Banks could have gone off for 35 points on, a national stage like that. But that's not the case. We unfortunately lost that game, which was so UNLV basketball, right? Let's just think about how the last 20 years have gone, 25 years. It's so UNLV basketball to be heavy favorites in a championship game, with on your home court, with your home crowd. You have the best player in the conference who's unstoppable, who was averaging like 30 points per game his like last few games, and then you lose to a subpar talented Colorado State team. It's the most UNLV thing ever. Okay, so let's get into after UNLV, going into the 2003 NBA draft. So I remember being really, really invested in the 2003 NBA draft because of Marcus Banks. More than any other draft ever, I would say the second closest would have been 2013 with Anthony Bennett, where there's a Rebel player expected to go really high in the draft. And so I am just all over the mock drafts and reading articles and watching draft videos, like the NBA draft, pre-draft workouts, like watching those videos. And I just remember seeing Marcus's name climbing up the draft boards every single time I would check from during his season at UNLV. I was checking mock drafts all the way up until a few days before the draft. And Marcus just kept getting higher and higher and higher because NBA teams were realizing what an amazing talent he was. So keep in mind, 2003 was one of the greatest drafts of all time. That is the LeBron James, Chris Bosh, Carmelo Anthony, Dwayne Wade drafts. Okay, one of the most loaded drafts in NBA history. Just a side note real quick. Think about Marcus was drafted in the same draft alongside LeBron James. Marcus has been out of the league for 14 years. He's been retired from basketball, professional basketball, for almost a decade, I believe. Not counting Big Three. And then, LeBron James is still scoring 25 plus points per game in the NBA playoffs today in 2025. Absolutely blows my mind. So, okay, let's get back on track here. So, I remember seeing him just climbing up the draft boards. I'm like showing people at school, like look. I actually remember printing out the mock draft because keep in mind that's how old I'm getting. This is before smartphones. So I would go on the computer at my house, look at the mock drafts, print them out, and then take them to school to show people, like, look, they have Marcus going number 20 overall to Dallas, which was exciting because for the longest time he wasn't projected to be a first-round draft pick. And so he was moving on the draft. It's just funny to me that I was printing stuff off the computer to show people when you think about like today's technology. So, okay, he ended up going 13th overall. He was drafted by the Memphis Grizzlies, but then he was traded to Boston. The Boston Celtics, historic franchise, getting Marcus Banks, who at the time was my favorite player. Like, I was obsessed with Marcus Banks, right? So being a diehard Laker fan, for my favorite player to go to the Boston Celtics was it was strange, but at the same time, I was so excited I didn't care. And first thing I did was I got a Marcus Banks Celtics jersey, number 11. I still have it to this day. I still have that jersey. And I loved it. I wore it all the time. I wore it to UNLV games. I wore it to school. I love that jersey. And then that summer, he played for the Boston Celtics in the Summer League. This was before the Vegas Summer League started. That's how long ago this was, because Vegas Summer League wasn't a thing at the time. So he played, I want to say it was in the Boston Summer League. So he was playing in front of all the Boston Celtics fans. And there was one moment that I will never forget where Boston was playing against Cleveland in the Summer League game. And obviously, every single seat was sold out because not only because it's Boston fans wanting to watch Marcus, but they're also wanting to watch the most hyped up draft pick in NBA history in LeBron James. So LeBron James gets matched up with Marcus on one particular possession, basically switching off of a screen. and Marcus does a little move and then blows by LeBron James for a layup. And LeBron, tried to recover and block the shot, but he was unable to. And I remember people made such a big deal over this because A, it was against LeBron James, but B, it showed how explosive, excuse me, it showed how explosive Marcus was, and his ability to get to the rim was, one of the best players in that draft overall as far as his ability to get to the rim. Okay, so let's talk about his NBA career. It did not go anywhere near as well as I had hoped or I thought it would. I mean, I thought Marcus was going to be an NBA All-Star someday. I'm like, he's too talented. He's too athletic. Nobody can guard him. He's a great defensive player. There's no way this guy's not going to be an NBA star. So, but I also was a kid, right? I was like 16 or something. So I didn't understand basketball at the same level that I do today, right? So obviously there's a lot of different variables that can prevent a player from being a star NBA player. But all right, so let's talk about first I'll talk about his career in Boston. I got NBA League Pass. I actually got my dad to buy NBA League Pass for me just so I can watch all of Marcus's games. So when I say I watched all of Marcus's games, I'm not kidding. I watched at least 70 Boston Celtics games Marcus's first season. And since it was East Coast, the games would start around 4 p.m. So I would get off school, come home, whatever, do a little homework, eat something, and then put on the Boston Celtics game. And that was I did this 2-3 days a week. And I remember every single time Marcus would get in the game, I was so nervous. Almost, it's weird, how you would think it was my brother. As hard as I was rooting for this guy, you would think it was my brother. So every time he would get in the game, I was nervous because I just wanted him to do so well. So every time he would miss a shot, I'd be like, God, dang it. I would be sad and down. And every time he would make a shot, I'd get really excited. And it felt like, if my memory serves me right, it felt like every single time Marcus got in the game, he would score. And whether it was a three or he would just make a super athletic, explosive move to the rim, or he had this, it was Marcus Banks' go-to move was like this hesitation. I don't even know the right terminology to describe it, but it was kind of like he fakes you out into thinking he's not about to drive. So he kind of gets ready to do his dribble at the top of the key, and then he kind of relaxes his body a bit while he looks to his left. And then it gets the defender to kind of relax a little bit because the defensive player thinks that he's getting ready to pass the ball. And then all of a sudden, boom, he would just explode to his right. And he was so good at this because of how much of a incredible first step he had. He would get by his man almost every time with this move. And I just remember it felt like he scored almost whenever he wanted to. And so I didn't understand why he wasn't getting more minutes. And I remember there's other point guards that were coming off the bench. I don't have their roster in front of me right now, so I'm drawing a blank on names, but I remember his face. But he was competing with Marcus for those point guard minutes. And I just felt like he was not as good as Marcus, and it drove me nuts every single time he would come back in the game and Marcus went to the bench. Again, I'm like that parent who's biased and just thinks that their kid should be never come out of the game because their kid is better. That was my 16-year-old mindset at the time. So, okay, so he did not end up being what Boston hoped he'd be, which was a starting point guard. He was just a backup point guard. And then he ends up getting traded to the Minnesota Timberwolves, where he had a breakout season. And that was really excited because I was like, yes, Marcus figured it out. And now he is a good NBA player because he was Minnesota's starting point guard. Minnesota wasn't very good, I remember. So that obviously had something to do with it. But Minnesota, he was their starting point guard, and he put up pretty good numbers. Let me pull up Marcus's NBA stats. So let's go over kind of what he did in his career before I move on. Okay, so yeah, he averaged 6 points a game his rookie year in Boston, 4.6 points per game his sophomore year. So his minutes decreased, unfortunately, which is never a good sign when you're a young player that they're trying to develop. Okay, that's never a good sign. But then he gets to Minnesota, where he averages 12 points, 4.7 assists, 1.2 steals. And so, yeah, that was his breakout year, which led to him getting a pretty big contract with the Phoenix Suns. So this was it. Like when Marcus signed that contract with the Phoenix Suns, this was supposed to be his calling. Like this was a massive role for him. He got a huge payday, and this was where he was supposed to excel. However, the bad news is it did not go well in Phoenix, and I even found an old article talking about Marcus Banks was considered a top 5 most regrettable contract in Phoenix Suns history. But this is as of 2018, so there could be, keep in mind, there could be some new players on this list. I'm not going to go over all of them, but because it's not relevant, but I will talk about what they said about Marcus Banks. Okay, so Marcus Banks signed a 5-year, $21 million contract, and it says, Marcus Banks was supposed to be the answer to the question that is, who is Steve Nash's backup? Banks had been with the Boston Celtics previously and was known as a good defensive player, but not so good on offense, which was exactly what the Suns needed. The team went ahead and signed Banks to a 5-year deal worth $21 million, and they expected him to be a solid backup for Nash. Banks ended up being incredibly inconsistent, and it was apparent he did not fit the role as Nash's backup. Banks was on the team for a year and a half before he was shipped out of town along with Shawn Marion in a deal to the Miami Heat that brought over Shaquille O'Neal. The $21 million deal Banks received proved to be much too expensive for somewhat not playing well, and Banks was gone. Okay, so, this was unfortunately the downfall of his NBA career, as he never really recovered from this, and he never really got a lot of big minutes or put up big stats after this happened. I really don't know why he fell off so much after Minnesota. I don't know. I think there's a lot of different theories. I don't remember his injury status. I don't remember, this was a long time ago. To my knowledge, he was a hard worker. What I think it was his game, his style was just not the ideal fit for what the league wanted and what Phoenix Suns wanted, probably more so at that time. And so that's what kind of led to him kind of being bounced around. He went to, like I said, it went to the Miami Heat, and then he went to Toronto Raptors and then New Orleans Pelicans before he was finally out of the NBA, putting up very limited minutes during his time at those destinations. And then, okay, so where are we at here? Okay, so I wanted to talk about, there's something that Bill Simmons does on his podcast where he talks about players from history, players in the past. And he says, were they before their time? Were they just right for their time, or were they after their time? And what he means by this is based on how good of a basketball player were, or not how good they were, but based on what they could do, their style of play, were they good on defense? Could they shoot? Were they a true point guard? Were they a score first point guard? Whatever the case may be. Did they fit into that era? Okay. So for example, if you have a big man in the 90s who was a pretty good 3-point shooter, but because 3-point shooting wasn't looked at the same as it is today, that big man was either not allowed to shoot threes or he'll only shoot like maybe one a game. That player, had he been drafted 20 years later, and now in 2025, if he was a 23, 24-year-old, he might have been a much better player today with analytics and the way the game is played. So that's kind of what they mean. Like, were you before your time? Were you drafted at the right time, or were you after? For Marcus Banks, even though he wasn't a great shooter, he only shot 33% from three for his career, which isn't horrible, but it's definitely not good. I think you could actually argue that he was a little before his time, and here's why. We're talking about a guy who was an elite defensive player, but was so explosive defensive. He was a nightmare for defensive players. And a guy that could get to the rim so easily. So I think Marcus, if he was in the right situation, maybe he started alongside a backcourt with a very good passing guard who's maybe bigger, maybe like a 6'5" passing guard, a facilitator, or just like a LeBron James type of star who's kind of like your main facilitator. And then Marcus's role would be to guard the other team's best guard, because that's what Marcus was known for, was his defense. And then on offense, just using his speed to get to the rim, collapse the defense, and kick out for three. I think if he were in the right situation with the right teammates under the right system today, I do think he would have been a better player. Okay. So that's my, argument for it, that he was actually before his time. So before we move on from his NBA career, there was a couple quotes regarding Marcus Banks that I really like to talk about. So Allen Iverson, one of the greatest basketball players ever, gave Banks one of the best compliments you could give a player. He said that Marcus Banks was the toughest player that he went against because of his defense. Marcus Banks gave Allen Iverson such a difficult time. Okay, and what a remarkable compliment to get from such an elite Hall of Fame talent like Allen Iverson. And then Kevin Garnett, another one of the greatest players ever, who was Marcus's teammates. At one point, he was quoted saying that Marcus was the quickest player he ever played with. And, another fantastic compliment. Just thinking about the talent that Marcus had, he should have had a longer, better career. But he still made a lot of money. He still had a lot of good memories. So it wasn't like it was a complete failure. I don't look at him as a bust, right? It wasn't like he was a top 3-4 pick. I think he wasn't as good of a career as Boston. He didn't have as good of a career as Boston had hoped, but he still had he still played over 300 games and had a lot of big games and had a lot of exciting moments. So, okay, so just to go over a little bit what he did after his NBA career. He did go overseas. He played in Greece, France, Lebanon, and he was quoted saying that playing in Dubai, Dubai is like a bigger, nicer, richer Miami, from what I've been told. And he said it was the best paid vacation in the world. Getting to play there while also getting paid good money was like the best vacation ever, right? And then in 2017, he was one of the first players ever to be signed to the Big Three. The Big Three is that 3-on-3 basketball league where it's all it is former NBA players. It's started by Ice Cube. It's very popular. A lot of people watch it. A lot of people pay money to go to those games. Marcus Banks played several seasons for the Big Three. And he was also part of the team that included Mike Bibby, Ricky Davis, and Joe Smith. And then today what Marcus is doing is he's still around a lot. He does podcasts. He's on broadcasts. He's very eloquent. He's a very good speaker. He's able to talk about his, everything he's trying to do for the community, everything he's done in his playing career, past stories, which that made me, I just now remembered one thing I wanted to talk about. Back to when he was playing for Boston, he recently told a story about his rookie year. He went to the training facility and Paul Pierce was on the treadmill running. And he goes up to Paul Pierce and he's like, "What's up, Paul? How's it going?" Or something like that. And I guess Paul Pierce was like, "What the F you want, rookie? Can't you see I'm trying to run on the treadmill here? Like, get out of here. Like why are you talking to me?" Like, super disrespectful to him. And then I think Banks was just kind of like, "Oh, wow, okay, whatever." And Banks was like, "Man, what he should have done was say like, hey, hop on the treadmill next to me. Like, we're not trying to talk right now. We're trying to get better. Like, get on the treadmill next to me, start running." Like, that's what he should have done. And I already never liked Paul Pierce for so many reasons. I just don't think he's a good dude. He played for the Celtics, which I hated. He did that infamous faked an injury while he had to be brought off the court on a freaking wheelchair. And then he comes back in the game like he's supposed to be some sort of superhero, and all those idiot Boston fans are rooting for him. Like, it was the stupidest thing I've ever heard ever. I remember my beagle one time looked like she was really hurt. And so she was like limping and whimpering, and all of a sudden, piece of food gets brought out of the fridge that we were going to eat. And all of a sudden that injury that my beagle had mysteriously went away and she was fine. So we called my beagle Paul Pierce for like years after that, for that reason. Anyway, it's just a little side story of like how douchey, how much of a douchebag Paul Pierce was and is, and how like there's other NBA superstars would have never done that to Dame or to Marcus. Damian Lillard, for instance, he would have said like, hop on the treadmill next to me, let's get this work in. So okay, that was just a little side story. And then what he's doing today is he started the Marcus Banks Academy. I'm going to put the website in my show notes, where they're working with young kids. You know, they're playing basketball, but also teaching them about life, teaching them about the importance of, you know, taking school seriously, you know, kind of like giving them the skills to prepare them for not just basketball, but what the real world is like. So he's out there doing really big things, really good things for the community. And it's just a testament to the type of person he is, how he wants to give back, and he's just a very positive guy. He's not bitter towards anything that happened in his career. You know, he's just out there working hard, doing everything he needs to do to make the world a better place. And absolutely love Marcus Banks for that. And, you know, to wrap this thing up, you know what's funny real quick? When I Googled Marcus Banks after Europe, because I'm trying to find anything about Marcus Banks to include in this podcast I didn't already know about. Google popped up. After playing basketball in Europe, Marcus Banks became a renowned visual anthropologist. He held various academic positions at Oxford University, including director of the University's School of Anthropology and Museum of Ethnography. I was like, what? There's no way Marcus did this and I didn't know about it. There's no way he went to university at Oxford and like became an anthropologist and did all this stuff and I never knew about it till now. There's no way. And sure enough, there's another Marcus Banks. But this Marcus Banks, who's like an old white guy, he never played basketball. But for some reason, AI combined the two on accident. And I just thought that was hilarious that popped up. But so one last thing I want to say, and then I'll wrap this up as we're 43 minutes in. I think Marcus's story is inspiring because it's a perfect example of what young kids could be if they put in the work, if they take school seriously. Had Marcus, like so many other athletes have done before, had he not decided to go to summer school and take those classes seriously, and instead of just doing that, he decided to screw around all summer, smoke weed, hanging out with his homies, he never would have gone and got a college scholarship. He never would have been a professional basketball player. And who knows, he might be working at Foot Locker right now, you know, living in an apartment, not happy with his life. But because he took school seriously and his will to, you know, reach his full potential and try and make something of himself, he ended up having this unbelievable, outstanding career and also being one of the best players in UNLV basketball history, one of the most exciting, electrifying players in UNLV basketball history. Okay, Rebel fans, thanks for listening. I'm going to be doing a lot more of these as the months go by. I was honored to do Marcus Banks for my first one, as he's one of my favorite players of all time. And yeah, until next time, Rebel fans.